as the head of Magister of English Education. Time and place is yours.
Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan selamat siang semua. Saya membawa kerpean ini biar nggak salah menyebut namanya nanti ya. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, my students and my colleagues, and we are gathered today to explore the fascinating interplay between. We look at the topic today is about how language, culture, and curriculums could be brought together. And it is an absolute pleasure to have join us today Dr. Raqib from Monash University. My student, that today that the world is increasingly connected, right? Whether it is through humans and human communication, especially through internet. Yeah. So our ability to comprehend and understand or appreciate different language and culture holds a very great significance for us as English learners. Yeah. And language, there's a very beautiful vehicle of communication. It is not only a means of communication, actually. It is also a gateway to interlock, to integrate humans' culture. And language and culture also shapes our thoughts, yeah. And then perceptions, and then interaction as a powerful tool for both of us, both of human beings, to preserve and evolve our heritage. And today we have a privilege to host our distinguished guest, Dr. Raqib Chowdhury. Is it Chowdhury? Chowdhury, yeah, who is a lecturer from Monash University. That she is quite industrious, yeah. He is quite expert in the field of language, culture, and curriculums. There's actually one subject that he's teaching at Monash. And he got many awards, yeah, from the university. For example, the Dean's Award for programs that enhance learning. And then Vice Chancellor Award for Social Inclusions, and then Dean's Award of Outstandings and Research Publication, and as well as the Vice Chancellor Award for Social Inclusions. Yeah. So basically, he is very expert in the field of language, culture, and curriculums. And then there are so many publications that he has done so far that I cannot mention one by one here. And then, okay, through this general lecture, or studium general, yeah, we aim to foster a deeper appreciation for the influence of language and culture and in our education systems. And then our understanding of a curriculum design and implementation is enriched when we acknowledge the deserved linguistic and cultural backgrounds, well, yeah. By our learners, yeah. By embracing the richness of linguistic diversity and cultural perspective, we can create an inclusive and empowering educational environment that truly resonates our students. Yeah. Okay, just to the point, I'd urge you to take all the opportunity to get insight from Dr. Raqib. And let us engage in a lively discussion. Yeah. Please ask a question after this. Yeah. Then share maybe your experience as a, maybe you are also, student also teachers, right? Yeah. As a master student, you also teachers. And then share your experience, yeah, about your students. And then please open your minds, yeah, to new perspective. And together we can sow the seed of understanding, tolerance, and empathy to our educational landscapes, nurturing for a future generation that celebrates the beauty of language and culture. Once again, a warm welcome to each and every one of us, and please welcome Dr. Raqib Chowdhury. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for Mr. Agus Wijayanto for the speech. In this afternoon session by Dr. Raqib Chowdhury will be moderated by Ms. Susi, SPD MAD. For Ms. Susi Yati and Dr. Raqib, time is yours.
Thank you very much, the diligent lady, diligent girl there, the master of ceremony. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. How are you this afternoon? Good? Still good? Are you hungry? Yes? I think we have food outside. Oh, no. But you get food as well. Yeah, so not enough? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there will be second round if you are still, joining this session until the end. Okay. All right, I think this is a very nice occasion that we have already a very distinguished and a very wonderful lecturer, speaker, presenter today in the second session. If this morning the session was a visiting professor, but this session is, it's called Stadium General. So Dr. Raqib Chowdhury, well, I'm pronouncing the right name because you just told me that, yes, Dr. Raqib Chowdhury, PhD, will be presenting about language, culture, and curriculum, and how these three things are intercorrelated each other and help each other. Okay, so we'll be finding out how interesting it is, and I believe that it will be very, very interesting. Okay, but before that, I guess that some of you, or maybe half of you, were not joining the session this morning, so I think I need to introduce the speaker to you again. Yeah, that we have already a speaker among us. He is Dr. Raqib Chowdhury. He is a lecturer, senior lecturer in the Faculty of Education at Monash University. And he is originally from Bangladesh. Yes, Bangladesh. And then, you may give applause too, if you want. Yeah, everyone likes giving applause to speaker. Okay, and don't be feeling hesitant if you want to give your clap hands. Right, and then he is actually now teaching in TESOL program, and he is the lecturer of Mishahara, if you want to know, Shahara, okay, and then, yes, he is behind the scene, she is behind the scene, sorry. And then his areas of teaching and research are in TESOL or EFL. So if you want to know what TESOL is, TESOL stands for Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, or EFL. EFL is English as a Foreign Language. And then sociolinguistics, we have common sense. Yeah, we have common interest. Yes, social, yes, I love those. And then identity, international education, bilingualism, HE policy studies, and then coloniality and critical theories. I think all of them are our cup of tea. Yeah, I believe it's gonna be interesting if we have, maybe someday in the future we have joint research with you through Mishahara maybe. Yeah, okay. Okay, I think without any further ado, it's not wise if I tell more and more. So I think I will be giving Dr. Raqib Chowdhury to give his presentation. And for the rest of today, I will be serving you as a moderator. Okay, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ibu, and thank you very much, Pak Agus, Dr. Agus. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Senang sekali bisa berada di kota Solo yang indah ini bersama Bapak Ibu para pendidik. The rest of the presentation will be in English, not in Bahasa, because I don't speak Bahasa. It's great to see you here today, and I can see some familiar faces because some of you attended my lecture in the morning, this morning, so familiar faces around here. How many of you were at my session in the morning? How many of you were in the morning, in the morning session? Yeah, just a number of you there. All right. And I know that most of you here are master students, right? So you've finished your bachelor's. And do we have some international students as well? International students from outside Indonesia? Yeah, okay. All right, that's great. We also had some international students in the morning session. And I've already met 2 Bangladeshi students on scholarship from UMS, which is wonderful. I didn't know that UMS offers international scholarships. I didn't know that, yeah. So very glad to be here. I've been to Indonesia many, many times, but this is actually the first time in Solo, first time. But I visit Indonesia almost every year, and I love this country. I feel very much at home, and it feels culturally familiar. Today we'll be talking about culture. So culturally, it feels very much like home. And it's my pleasure to be with you here. As I say, Darah Indonesia, Indonesia in my blood. It's like my second home, my second country. Not Australia. I've been living in Australia for 24 years. I'm an Australian citizen. My children were born there. And it's a pretty long period of time. But I probably feel more attached to Indonesia than Australia. I think it's something to do not with how many years you've lived, but your emotional connection. I think that's more important. Do you agree? Yeah, it's something like that. Shahara, can you show yourself? Come over here. All right, come over here. So, okay, just come over here. Now, this might have been my first visit to Solo and to UMS, but the Monash presence was already there because Miss Shahara Amelia was my student at Monash University more than 10 years ago. She graduated in 2013 in June, so exactly 10 years ago with a master's degree, and we have remained in touch, and Shahara is not one of those students that you would forget over time. It was her personality, it was her sense of humor, it was the way she interacted in my classrooms, because of which even after 10 years, I remembered Shahara. So in a sense, Shahara is the reason why I'm here today. So there you are, Shahara.
That you come here. So thank you very much, Raqib. Especially for the DEE students, if you have a dream, yeah, like I myself did have a dream to go abroad, but never to study at the time. So if you have a dream, whatever it is, you can do it as long as you try your best. So probably you will meet Raqib after you graduate, maybe 2 or 3 years later on. Yeah, he will be at Monash. He will be very happy to help you for your academic. Thank you very much, Raqib.
Thank you, Shahara. And now that you know that, Shahara was my student, please don't give her any trouble in the class. She's very nice. Thank you, Shahara. It's good. And yes, just like Shahara, I would like to say that I would be very happy to welcome you at Monash University. We have a lot of students at Monash University from Indonesia, many students. And even among PhD students, I'm supervising 2 PhD students at the moment. And my student from Sebelas Maret University, she graduated just 3 or 4 months ago. She's a doctor already. So let's get started. I've already been introduced by Ibu, so I'm not going into details, but this is my profile. If you look at the red fonts, you will see that I'm quite well connected to my second country, Indonesia. I've been here many times. And, you know, as a visiting professor, keynote speaker, etc., I've also written articles about Indonesia and with Indonesian authors. And my curiosity to know more about this country, its languages, more than 700 languages, its ethnicities, more than 350 ethnicities, its history, its architecture is insatiable. I want to know more and more about this country because you should all be proud being Indonesian, living in such a country which is so rich according to its heritage and culture and all of that. This is in a way kind of significant. This diversity of Indonesia is significant as far as the topic is concerned because the topic is language, culture, and curriculum. So what I'll be talking about is how these three things interact with each other and how understanding one of these helps us understand something else. So this is what we will be doing today. We'll be looking at language, culture, but we will also be looking at identity, especially linguistic identity. So we have multiple identities. The part of identity that comes from our language is called linguistic identity. And of course, we will look at pedagogy or teaching, because when we talk about curriculum, we can't talk about curriculum without talking about teaching, because that is how curriculum is enacted. So teaching is the enactment of curriculum. And finally, we'll be talking about curriculum, which is the central interest for this topic. So I would like to start by asking you two questions at the beginning. So instead of posing for the photograph, please pay attention to me, young man. All right? Okay. So I want to ask you two questions. But I'm very informal, so don't worry. You don't have to be stiff. Just listen to me. So I want to ask two questions. Can we remove this to one side? Because I can't see it all. Come on. Strong guys, let's move it to one side. Because I can't see it. I can't see everyone together at the same time. We need to remove this. So here is my first question. Think about it. How would you answer this question? The first one. Maybe I've moved too much far away from the remote. Okay, here. How do you feel about your Indonesian accent when speaking in English with foreigners? How do you feel? Does anyone speak with a native speaker accent when you speak in English? Anyone here? Or do you have an Indonesian accent? Indonesian accent, right. So when you speak to a foreigner, when you speak to me or to a native speaking person, how do you feel when you speak in English? Do you feel, let me say, you say yes or no. Do you feel uncomfortable? Yes. Do you feel nervous? Yes. Do you feel embarrassed? Yes. Do you feel ashamed? Yeah, some said yes, some said no. Okay. But it's probably not a very good feeling, right? You feel uncomfortable, if not ashamed, maybe uncomfortable, maybe nervous, maybe embarrassed. So here is my second question. What is your preferred English, British or American? American. British, both actually. So let's see, show of hands. How many of you like British accent? Like the way Hugh Grant speaks? Raise your hand, British English? Okay, sometimes, yeah. When? What time? When joking with friends, yeah, that's good. Yeah, and what about American? Do you like American English? Like Hollywood movies, very cool, right? Okay, so why do you like American or British accent but not Indonesian accent? Why? What's wrong with Indonesian accent? Why do you feel ashamed or uncomfortable or embarrassed when you have Indonesian accent? Because you're not British, you're not supposed to have a British accent. You are not American, you're not supposed to have an American accent. Why are you trying to be American or British? Why are you trying to be someone else? That's not your identity. Easy to understand? No, actually not necessarily, because if you speak in a British accent, that might actually be harder to understand. But if you speak in intelligible English with an Indonesian accent, that might actually be easier to understand. So intelligibility has nothing to do with accent. It's a completely different thing, right? So we have to think about it. Now, guys, let's take a look at some of the ways in which English is used in this country, in Indonesia. Let's take a look. Several examples. I'm sure you've seen this. How many of you like seafood? Seafood? Okay. All right. This would not be a very nice place to sleep at night with the bed sheet on. Okay, what about this? Entry, please. S crime. It's on a hot day, you want to have some S crime? Okay. So if you want, boys, if you want a free wife, go to Indira Maret. You'll get a free wife. Okay. There's more. Okay. Cream bath. Facial is Faisal. Yeah. There's more. Ayam goreng, fried chicken. Yeah, fried chicken. Do you like fried chicken? Okay. Tahu bakar, you know, bakar means grilled, so it's burn, known burn. All right, this one is really good. It's for tourists, English-speaking tourists. It says, welcome tourists, we speak English. We know what kind of English, right? Okay, there is more. I mean, even if you want to translate from Bahasa to English, English to Bahasa, even then we have problems here. Or a private tuition. Private. Yeah. Now, these signboards will make you say RIP English, rest in peace English, the death of English. So in this article, the author is saying that these are English fails, right? You know, mispronunciation, obviously the spelling is wrong and all of that. And one couldn't stop laughing your hearts out. You know, that's what we did. We all laughed at it. Very amusing, right? Very, very funny. But no, it's actually not funny. Think about it. It's not funny. I mean, it is funny, but it is not funny. If you are learning English language education, if you're doing a master's, for most likely, in the future, you will be teaching English to your students, right? Don't try to make your students have or try to have a British or American accent. They're Indonesians. They should have an Indonesian accent, okay? Now, in all of these cases, fried chicken, tahu barn, bed sheet, what else did we have? What else did we have? Free wife, yes. Okay. In each of these examples, we know exactly what it means, right? There is no miscommunication. There is a misspelling, but there is no miscommunication. We know exactly what they are doing. What is the purpose of language? The purpose of language is to communicate. And these signboards communicate. Who was it written by? What does it have? Why does it have spelling mistakes? Because it was written by someone, the signboard painter, the artist, who didn't have the privilege like you guys to study at a high school or a university, receive good university at UMS. They were not highly educated or adequately educated. They probably could not afford the education that you had. So you laugh at them because of their spelling mistake, but the way they learned about this, you know, like free wife or whatever it is, bedsheet, this is the kind of pronunciation they learned by hearing. It's an acquisition. But without actually that kind of literacy, that is only possible in formal classrooms. They didn't have it. So yes, of course it is funny. Of course it is funny. But as English teachers or as future English teachers, we should see that the purpose of language here is to communicate, and they communicate despite the misspellings, they communicate. And there are reasons why they have made these spelling mistakes, and you know, in a way, it's actually not funny. They have done exactly what needs to be done. There's no problem with that. So no, not RIP English. This is how English will actually survive, not die, as an international language. As Ibu was saying, EFL, English as a foreign language, or ESL, English as a second language, in Australia we don't call it ESL, we call it EAL, English as an additional language. It's the same thing. And the reason why in Australia we don't use ESL, because we recognize that ESL can be a bit exclusive, not inclusive. It is saying English as a second language, but actually English might be the third or fourth language. So if one of you, a Javanese, goes to Indonesia, goes to Australia and learns English or continues to learn English, it's not ESL, it's actually English as the third language, because Javanese is your first language, not Bahasa. Bahasa is your second language, English is your third language, so we say EAL. But if we look beyond the constructs of EFL and ESL or EAL, there is a third thing, which is EIL. English as an international language. English as an international language means that English belongs to whoever speaks it. It's an international language. If you are still desiring to have a British accent or an American accent in the year 2023, then you still have that colonial mindset of before the Second World War, where many countries were colonized by English-speaking countries. Not Indonesia. In Indonesia, we had Dutch. But in many parts of the world, including Bangladesh, my country of origin, the British, they ruled us for more than 200 years. They left in 1947, but they left behind something. Something that gave us a lot of progress, but the language English, but on the other hand, it also made us enslaved to English systems. And that kind of colonial mindset, which still wants us to sound like them. And that is not right. I'm not supposed to sound like a British person because I'm not British. I'm supposed to sound like a Bangladeshi or an Aussie English speaker, not a British one. So don't try to be a British speaker, or don't try your students to sound American or British. So the concept of EIL, English as an international language, says that because of globalization, because of historical events, because of the chronology of how the language of English has evolved throughout the world in the last 600 years, 700 years, is because of the way it was used as an instrument of colonization by the powers, the colonial powers in the 18th and 19th century. And they have left, but English is still there as a colonial instrument, trying to colonize us. So we have appropriated that, and we have said, no, we will still use English, but as our language, not as a borrowed language from the British or from the American. It is our own language. So let's not be ashamed of our Indonesian accent. And that is the first thing we need to remember if we want to connect language, culture. And then we can talk about curriculum. So that's the first thing we need to remember. So this is a short video clip. Do we have internet connected to the computer? Is it connected to the computer? Okay, what's this? A short video clip where we have two Americans talking to each other. Can you actually click on the video? It's an embedded video, so you can just click on it here. Previous one. Okay, let's try. Oh, it doesn't work?
I try to end slideshow.
Okay, so what happens is there is a, no, it's okay, wait. No, if it doesn't work, it's fine. I can just explain. We don't need it. It's okay, it's okay. Yeah, let's go back to slideshow mode. Can you go back to slideshow? Okay. No, it's nothing. I mean, they must have this. They know what I'm talking about. All right. Okay, anyway, so listen. I won't be able to show you the video because it's not loading for some reason. But you can watch it. You can watch it on YouTube. It's called What Kind of Asian Are You? And it's just a funny thing to show that we sometimes make assumptions by the looks of our appearances and all of that. So I'm sure when you first saw me enter this this room, many of you thought I was from India, right? Did you think I was from India? Yeah, of course. I mean, that is natural because I look like Shah Rukh Khan, don't I? Yeah. No, just joking, but there's nothing wrong with that, except there is actually something wrong with that, because when we assume someone is from a particular ethnicity or nationality or religion or language or whatever, we actually impose certain values on them. And as I will show in the next slide, and some of you were in my class in the morning, right? Some of you were in my class. Remember xenophobia, ethnocentrism? Yeah. So when we think someone is from India, just because they have a certain skin color or eyes or nose, we make certain assumptions about who they are, what they like, what they don't like, what they do, what they don't do. And that regulates our behavior towards them. Okay? So there is nothing wrong if you thought I was from India, because I look like Shah Rukh Khan. But if you ask me, it would be wrong to ask me, are you Indian? No. The right question would be, where are you from? Not, are you Indian? So just a few days ago, I was at PGRI Adibuana, Surabaya University. There was a conference, I was a keynote. So in the afternoon, I was just going to some parallel sessions. So the moderator was there, and I just came to the front of the class to just say a few words to encourage the students. And the moderator in front of everyone suddenly told me, oh, sir, so nice you came here. I really like paratha. I really like paratha. You know what paratha is, the Indian bread? And I like Hindi movies, he was telling me. So I said, why are you saying you like paratha? We are not talking about food here. Because he was assuming I was from India. So he said, I like paratha. And I said, I like paratha too, but I'm not Indian. Okay? So let's be careful about things like three things. It's not working? Oh, you found the link? Yeah. Okay, maybe play it. All right, let's watch it. Yeah, yeah. Okay, good. And do we have, is the speaker connected so we can hear the big speaker? Or? Ah, here we are. All right, watch this, guys. It's a very short clip. There is no sound at the first, it's okay.
I try to manual.
Yeah, with the... All right, we're figuring out the audio connection. Okay, here we go.
Hi. Nice day, huh? Yeah, finally, right? Where are you from? Your English is
Just look
great.
at the subtitle. It's
San
okay.
Diego. We speak English there. Oh, where are you from? Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there. I mean before that. Before I was born. Yeah, like, wow, where are your people from?
All right. Yeah, let's get back to the slide. So, can someone tell me what's happening here? I mean, you know, it's funny, of course, but what's happening with the guy? What was funny, or what was kind of strange, or, you know, about the assumptions made by the guy? Yeah, so he was thinking she looks Asian, must be Asian. For her, Korean, Japanese is the same thing. And homogenization, it's like Korean means sushi, or Japanese rather, means sushi, right? And she was saying, where are you from? She said, San Diego. She said, no. Before that, she said, before I was born. So she actually meant, because you don't look American, you must be from some other country. Which means the assumption that all Americans look the same. They have to be white, they have to have big noses, not small noses, not look Asian, etc., etc. So the teriyaki thing is the same thing as the paratha thing. You know, the guy at the Surabaya University who said, I love paratha. You know, it's like that, you know. Okay, you love paratha, I love paratha too, but why are you telling me about paratha? This is a conference. Oh, I thought you were from India. No, he didn't say that, but of course that was the assumption made. Okay, so what's the point here? The point here is that we sometimes make assumptions based on visible manifestations of our identity, and they do not align with our actual identity. So we have language, which is a part of identity. Now, the topic for today's presentation is language, culture, identity, language, culture, curriculum. So we are actually looking at how language and culture and linguistic identity can shape the way we, as English teachers, enact the curriculum in the classroom. So therefore, we will also be talking about pedagogy. We'll be talking about that as well. So some of the obstacles to critical thinking, and I was talking about this in the morning class as well, is xenophobia. What is xenophobia? Can someone tell me or give me an example of xenophobia? Come on, those of you who were in my morning class. Xenophobia means fear of the unknown. Fear of the unknown. What does that mean? Fear doesn't mean you are afraid. Fear means you are skeptical about something, you are doubtful about something, you are not trusting something because you don't know it. And xenophobia can stop us from being critical. Why am I talking about critical thinking? Because we will talk about critical pedagogy. So in order to enact the curriculum, while being sensitive to language and culture, we must think critically. And these are some of the things that stop us from being critical. One is xenophobia, not trusting the unknown or fearing the unknown. We don't like something, sometimes not because we know what it is, but because we don't know what it is. So if you hate something, or if you hate someone, or if you hate a country, or a food, or a cultural thing, or whatever, the question is, have you actually tasted it first? Have you tried it first? Or is it because you don't know it, that's why you're saying you don't like it? That's xenophobia. What is ethnocentrism? Can someone give me an example of ethnocentrism that we discussed in the morning? Chopsticks, hand eating. Who was in my class in the morning? You were in my class in the morning? What did I say about ethnocentrism? Do you remember? Okay, so the Indonesian people might make fun at Chinese people using chopsticks because that is strange. Oh, why would you eat rice with 2 sticks? It's kind of weird. But on the other hand, the Chinese people would think it is weird for someone to use their hands to eat. That is ethnocentrism, to judge someone else by the standards of your own culture. Because you think what you do in your culture is normal, everything else is abnormal. That is ethnocentrism. And the third thing is cultural relativism, which means that the cultural practices within a particular culture is always acceptable and unquestioned, which is problematic because in some cultures it is okay for underage marriage. So a 12-year-old girl can be married off, and that is accepted. But we know that psychologically speaking, physically speaking, someone at that age is actually not prepared for marriage. So we need to keep, we need to remember this. So what is criticality? How can we be critical? Does critical mean just to criticize something? Does critical mean just to disagree with something? To have your own opinion? No. Criticality is much more than that when it comes to curriculum. So I will show you 2 sentences. Again, this is from the morning slide. And I want you to see if you can be critical about these two sentences. Okay, here is the first sentence. Can you be critical about this sentence? In 1492, America was discovered by Christopher Columbus. Can you be critical about this? Yes, tell me how. We need some? Oh, we need some comma. So okay. So you are looking at the mechanics of writing, like punctuation. Okay, what about the meaning, what it actually means? Can you criticize it without the comma thing? So what it's saying is that in 1492, America was discovered by Christopher Columbus. Now, this is a historical fact, right? This is what it is taught in textbooks. It is true. We have evidence for it. There's no doubt about that in 1492, Christopher Columbus, who was sent on a trip by the Queen of Spain on 3 ships, discovered America and came back and told her queen, there is a land far on the west, it's called America. I mean, the American name came from somewhere else, but it is actually true. The problem is not with 1492. The year is correct. The problem is not with the fact that it was Christopher Columbus. The problem was with the word discovered. Why do you think discovered is a problem? Why do you think we're trying to be critical? Why do you think discovered is a problem? Because if you say America was discovered in 1492, you're saying before 1492 there was no America. And that is obviously not true, right? So when you say in 1492 America was discovered by Christopher Columbus, you are taking a Eurocentric view. That's where criticality is coming in. You are talking on behalf of the Americans, the Europeans, and you're saying the Europeans, it was discovered for the Europeans, but America was still there before they discovered it. And the Native Americans were still there, which they called the Red Indians. They were still there. But the Europeans didn't know it. So you are taking aside a particular perspective and denying alternative perspectives that it was already there. In 2021, the national anthem of Australia was changed. It used to say in the second line, Australia is a country which is young and free. It is free, okay, just like Indonesia, Raya, Merdeka. So, free country, fine. But it was also saying it was young. Why young? Because the white people from Europe came and settled in Australia less than 300 years ago. So, of course, it is young, right? I mean, Indonesia is much older than that. We have the Majapahit kingdom and all of that. But the lyrics of the national anthem in 2021 was changed. So now instead of saying we are young and free, we now say we are one and free. We no longer say it is young. Why? Because in the same way that America was not discovered by Christopher Columbus, it existed. In the same way, Australia is not a young country because the Aboriginal people lived in Australia for 60,000 years. So if you say it is a young country, you're only talking about white Australia. Well, Australia's current population is 25.6 million. It's very little, small compared to 280 million in Indonesia. And 49% of Australia's current population, 49%, is either first or second generation migrants who were born outside Australia. And most of them are not white people, they're like me, okay? So Australia is not a young country. So same way here. Here's the second sentence, my country of birth. Bangladesh is an overpopulated country. Can you criticize this sentence? Bangladesh is an overpopulated country. What do you think? Just like the first one, we are trying to be critical, right? What's our current population? Toha, Hassan, 180 million? More than that. Maybe. We've got 2 Bangladeshi international students here. Show your hands, Toha and Hassan. Okay, very nice to see you guys here. Okay. Okay, so Bangladesh is an overpopulated country. Yes, it is a fact because we have 85 million people living in a country that is smaller, much, much smaller than the island of Java. And so per square kilometer, the number of people, the population density is much higher than Indonesia. So of course it is overpopulated. We have statistical proof for it. The problem here is over, the word over. What do you mean by over? Over what? Who decides when it is over? Who decides when it is under? Where is the standard? Who sets it? It is not a natural thing to say if it crosses this percentage, it will be over, and otherwise it is under. There is no percentage. Someone must have made it, and indeed, yes, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the World Bank, they made a scale to decide which country is under and over so that they can categorize countries according to developed, developing, third world countries, industrially developed countries, overpopulated countries, underpopulated countries, into these categories so that they can provide some countries with donations and loans with very high interest rates, because that would give the World Bank, IMF, power to control them. So another colonial control. So the word overpopulated is a construct, and it has been done by someone. It is not natural. So see, we have to start thinking in that way, critical way, when it comes to our culture and our language. So I'll give you a few more examples of this. There are problems with being critical. As I said, critical doesn't mean just to disagree with something. So I'll show you my slides, and some of my students were here in the morning. I showed the same slides because it's a different class. So those of you who have already seen it, don't tell the answers, all right? Let's take a look. Let's consider two questions. You can see two shapes here, and these two shapes have names. What are the names? Do you know the names in Bahasa or Javanese or in English? What's the first one called? What is this called? Does it have a name? This one here? Or the second one? Okay, okay, let me tell you the names. You have to tell me which one is which. One is called Taketa, one is called Naluma. All right, so which one is Taketa? The one on the left or right? Taketa? Left. Naluma? Okay. I have another question. One is male, one is female. Yeah. Which one is male? Left. And so the one on the right is female. Yeah. Why? Why do you think the one, let me ask the boys. Why do you think the one on the right is female? Why? You're all grown-up boys, so you can tell me. Why do you think it's female, and why do you think it's called Naluma, the one on the right? Why? What's your opinion? Tell me. Yeah. Round, yes, yes, yes. Sharp, yeah, okay. Exactly, yeah. I mean, that's very logical. That's a very logical. Anything else? Or maybe you want to tell me when the girls are not here? Okay. So on the other hand, the one on the left is male and it is Taketa. Why is that? Because it is sharp, not round. What about the sound itself, Taketa? All right, so here's the thing. Most of you here think that the one on the left is called Taketa and it is male. And the other one is Naluma, it is female. Most of you think like that. And the reason is because the sound Taketa is staccato, Taketa, right? And Naluma is softer, Naluma. And also the shape, Taketa is like sharp edges, it's rough, ragged, etc. Naluma is softer, gentler, rounder. And we associate these sounds and these shapes with gender, male, female, okay? Now, we are not thinking critically. We are following our instincts in coming to these decisions. There's nothing wrong with that because we always do that. I mean, think about it. If I ask you, for example, to choose a name, a nickname, would you choose Naluma or Taketa? Taketa, because that sounds more like a male name, right? Naluma, what would you choose as your name? Taketa or Naluma, nickname? Do you want to be called Taketa or Naluma? Naluma, because you're female. Yeah, that's why. Exactly. So what we can conclude here is that our language determines how we perceive the world. How we see the world is determined by what kind of language we use. And our thinking and behavior are determined by our language. So here is the final example, then we will move on to pedagogy. So your master students, have you heard about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis? Have you heard about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis? Okay, so these two guys, Sapir and Whorf, they came together with the idea called the theory of linguistic determinism, which means language and how you think are connected, which means if your first language is Javanese, you think in a certain way. If your first language is English, you think in a certain way. If your first language is Minangkabau, Sasak, Maduris, you think in a different way. So the more languages you know and you can use, you can see the world in multiple ways. It is not just about the language, it is about the grammar of the language, the structure of the language, the linearity of the language. Do you write from the left to the right, like English, Bahasa, or from the right to the left, like Arabic, or from the top to the bottom, like Nihongo, Putonghua, Japanese or Chinese? So even the syntax, so, as I was saying in the morning, how do you say brown sugar in Bahasa? Gula merah, right? But why don't you say merah gula? Because in English they say brown sugar, they don't say sugar brown. Why is the adjective after the noun, not before the noun in Bahasa? There's nothing wrong with it, because syntactically, Bahasa is a distinct language from English. It doesn't have to follow English. It can be different. But because the syntax is different, we also think differently. And that's called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. So here is an example. The Inuit, or the people in Greenland, the Eskimos, they have more than 50 words to describe snow. They have 50 different words. What about in Bahasa? Salju, can you think of any other word for snow? There's just one, right? Because you don't need more than one word. Because your eyes will only see one kind of snow, and that's it. It's just snow, salju, salju, that's it. In Arabic, more than 100 words to describe camels. In Bahasa, unta, just one. So if you don't need a word, you probably don't have that word. On the other hand, if you don't have a word, you might not actually understand that word. So there are implications when you're studying a second language, because there's something called positive transfer or contrastive hypothesis, where your first language helps you understand your foreign language. If you don't have an equivalent, it might actually pose some problems in learning that foreign language, such as syntax, spelling, tense system, subject-verb agreement, male, female, so gender, all of these things might have problems. So family structures in Indonesia. Think about family structures. Look at these terms here. What about English? In English, you just have uncle and aunt. From mother's side, father's side. Older, younger. It's just uncle and aunt, brother, sister. And then the grandparents, you just have to word that prefix, great. And then you have great, and then you have great, 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 and then you have great, great. You have to add one great for each generation. So on one hand, in Bahasa, you have only salju and unta. You don't have much more, which makes Indonesia or Bahasa a rather poor language. But on the other hand, you have so many words in Bahasa that you don't have in English. So every language is its own unique representational system. And when you compare one language with another language, you will at best find approximations. You will find semantic approximations, which means the meaning is similar, but not quite the same. So how is all of this, criticality, taketa, naluma, male, female, identity, how is all of this related to curriculum? That is what the topic is. There are two types of thinking that can be promoted in the curriculum. On the left-hand side, you have egocentric or lower order thinking. In the curriculum, it doesn't matter primary school, high school, university, even when you're doing your PhD, you can promote lower order or egocentric thinking, or you can promote, facilitate higher order thinking, critical thinking. We need to move from the lower order thinking to the higher order thinking in order to make a better synergy between language and culture through pedagogy in the curriculum, and we call that critical pedagogy. So we are looking at studied, conscious, analytical, disciplined or methodical, truth-seeking, logical, and reflective kind of thinking. That is what we need to promote in the curriculum. What about cultural identity or cultural identity? When you think about a Javanese person, are most of you here Javanese? Most of you, are you Javanese here? Is there anyone from Sulawesi here? Anyone from Sulawesi? Okay. Which city are you from? Makassar? I will be in Makassar during Idul Adha. Yeah. And what do you say in Makassaris? Anyone else from Makassar? Okay. What do you say in Makassar? Sekali layar terkembang, pantang biduk suruh ke pantai. Makassaris? What does it mean? What does it mean? Come on, tell me your Makassaris. You have to tell me. What does it mean? Sekali layar terkembang, pantang biduk suruh ke pantai. What does it mean? That is in Makassaris. Do you understand what it means in Javanese? It sounds different. I know what it means. And I've been to Toraja as well. No, I've been to Toraja. Have you been to Toraja? No. No? Misa kada di potuo, pantan kada di pomate. That's Torajan. That is Torajan. Okay, so if you are from Makassar, and I ask you to describe Javanese, how would you describe a Javanese? How is a Javanese person different from a Makassaris? Sorry, too much attention on you. Just tell me, what do the Makassaris people think of Javanese people? Kind, very good. Yeah. Friendly. Sweet. Like sweet food. They like sweet food. Okay. Sweet candy, yeah. Sweet candy, yeah. What do the Javanese people think about, let's say, someone from Madura, Maduris? What do you think about Maduris people? So, no, that's food, but what kind of people are they? What kind of people are they? Tell me. Huh? Hard worker. Yeah, that's very good. What about Minangkabau? How's Minangkabau according to Javanese? What do Minangkabau do, or what kind of personality do they have? Okay, so anyway, there are cultural stereotypes that we make of people, and sometimes we do that within our same country. It's called provincialism. Now, in Indonesia, it is particularly complex because there are more than 700 ethnicities. And most of these ethnicities have their own distinctive language, culture, cultural practices, food, costumes, traditional dances, history, ideologies, values, traditional wisdom, even, health practices, like you could say traditional medicine. They are all very different. So Toraja, I've been to Toraja 3 times. It's in Sulawesi Selatan. But everything is different, language, culture, religion. Everything is different from Makassar or Bugis. Very, very different. And that is one of the things I love about Indonesia, because when I'm in Indonesia, I travel all over the place. So from here, I'm going to Semarang in 2 days. From Semarang, I'm going to Makassar. Then I'm going to Pangkep, Toraja. Then I'm going to Manado, Sorong, Raja Ampat, and then back to Surabaya. I love traveling and knowing more and more about Indonesia. So look at this here. So when we talk about culture and identity, or cultural identity of a person, like, Minangkabau, Javanese, Toraja, and Makassaris, It's not one or two things. We have mental, physical ability, gender, ethnicity, age. SES means socioeconomic status. Religion, sexual orientation, language, all of these things make us who we are, and everyone is unique. So it is very reductive, or it is very limited when you reduce a person in terms of the essentialized and stereotypical features, saying that Maduris are hardworking, Javanese are, what was it? Sweet or something. And Makassaris are what? They are great travelers. Makassaris are one of the first Indonesian people to go to Australia in their Pinisi boat. Okay, so they are great adventurers. So we tend to stereotype and homogenize something as complex as this into one or two attributes. And most of you here, I mean, all of you have been very kind enough to say good things like sweet, industrious, hardworking, etc. But there are also negative views of people. For example, I know there is a cultural, ideological, historical rivalry between Javanese and Minangkabau because they had a fight. So I know that the Minangkabau and Javanese have certain ways of stereotyping the other person, right? And that is, in all countries, there are things like that. So here is a quote by Frantz Fanon, who was one of the founders of post-colonial studies. I think I'll stand here in front of you because you guys are not paying attention. You guys are not paying attention. So, I mean, you don't have to be here. If it's boring, you can leave. It's okay. You will still get your certificate or whatever, not a problem. But, just, pretend that you're listening even if you don't like what I'm saying. Okay? Don't talk to each other, please. To speak a language is to take on a world, a culture. And that is exactly what it means. When you learn a language, you have a new way of looking at the world. And when you are limited to one language, you only have one lens to look at the world. And that is why they say bilingualism. When you know more than one language, it's not just about the practical aspect of being able to use two languages. So, for example, it is helpful if you travel. So if I learn Bahasa, it is helpful for me if I come to Indonesia. So when I don't have Shahara with me and I'm lost, I'll still be able to find my way out by using some words, if not full sentences. So very practical, but it's much more than that practicality of communication. When you learn a new language, you also have a new pair of eyes to look at the world and see things that you are not able to see in your first language. And that's why scientists, not just applied linguists, but neuroscientists, they have done brain scans, and they have seen that the neuroplasticity of the human brain, the way your brain operates, is very different for people who speak more than one language. If you speak 2 or 3 more languages, you actually are smarter. And the good thing about Indonesia is that most people already speak 2 languages, regional language and Bahasa. So Javanese, Bahasa. 2 distinct language systems. And then you learn English. No wonder Indonesian students that I see at Monash University are so smart because they can see the world in 3 different ways. Whereas most English-speaking Aussies, they only speak one language, they have only one way. Right, Shahara? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so just think about this and just keep that in mind. But culture can be viewed in different ways. There is not only one way of looking at culture. I'm not talking about how complex culture is, but you can actually understand culture in different ways. So here are 3 images. You must have seen these images before. So you have heard about multicultural, cross-cultural, intercultural. So which one do you think is appropriate to describe the cultural demographic composition of Indonesia? Is Indonesia multicultural or cross-cultural or intercultural? Which one do you think is more appropriate? So we usually use the word multicultural when we describe a country, right? We don't say this country is cross-cultural or intercultural. We usually use the word multicultural, which means more than one culture. All right. Even in Australia, we say Australia is very multicultural, and that is true. It's true, because you have, in fact, Indonesia is much more multicultural than Australia. It's much more multicultural. And Australia's multiculturalism is, at least in modern times, because of the migrants coming from Europe and the rest of the world, although we had more than 200 Aboriginal groups in Australia already, and they were all different. But in Indonesia, it has always been multicultural. Even before independence in 1945, think about all the ethnicities. It has always been multicultural, okay? But if you look at the images, what do the images tell you about the difference between multicultural, cross-cultural, and intercultural? What do you think? Because that's 3 different ways of looking at cultural interaction. So when we move from the left to the right, it is getting more and more complex, right? The first one is just a few dots, each dot representing one culture. The second one is showing an arrow between 2 dots. And the arrow is not bidirectional, it is unidirectional. It's like it's from here to here, but not the other way around. And the third one is the arrows are all over the place. It's almost like every circle is connected to almost every circle, and in most cases, actually all cases, in a bilinear way. So both ways, like this way and this way as well. So what this means is when we say multicultural, or when we say that my pedagogy is multicultural, my teaching is multicultural, the curriculum is multicultural, we mean that we recognize that there are many cultures. And that's a good thing. But it is not good enough. Why? Because multiculturalism says that I recognize there are many cultures and they are all distinct, but I don't care about them. I know there are, in my class, there are people from Sumatra. There are Achenese people. There are people from Madura. So you recognize them, but you don't do anything about them. That is multiculturalism. And that's why there are no arrows here. There is no arrow. It's just like I have people from 7 cultures in my country, or 10 cultures from my country. That's it. And I don't do anything about it. Cross-cultural is usually when one culture tries to understand another culture through difference, comparison, and contrast. Cross-cultural. So there is some dialogue. Intercultural is the best because intercultural means it's not just recognition, but it is about dialogue. And it's a 2-way dialogue. So it's not like I only recognize there are 7 cultures, but I talk to them, they talk to each other. Therefore, you have the arrows from everywhere to everywhere, there are arrows. And that dialogue results in better understanding, less prejudice. And therefore, I am not only someone from a country that has paratha, but they know that India and Bangladesh are different countries. We may look the same, but yeah, I may look like Indian, but I'm probably not Indian. So that's it. So multicultural is recognition, tolerance. Intercultural, dialogue, integrated, okay? Let's look at another image. There we go. Multi means lots of cultures. Inter means within and between. Now, as far as the curriculum is concerned, when you talk about multiculturalism or interculturalism, we are not always talking about English, although you're doing English language education. We are talking about the cultural diversity within Indonesia. So think about yourself in the role of a teacher in your classroom. How would you deal or interact with someone who is from Borneo, from Kalimantan, or from somewhere far away, like from Sorong, so from what's that island called? From Jayapura? That's Papua. From Papua or Borneo, what kind of assumptions would you make about that person? Would you differentiate your instruction for that person? Would you recognize their first language? That is not possible through multiculturalism because it is passive. It is only possible through an active attitude towards culture, which involves dialogue and interaction, which is intercultural. Now, if you look at the history of these different three ways of looking at culture, one evolved after the other. They didn't happen at the same time. So if you look at this image, in the 70s, 60s and 70s, after the Second World War, when the colonizers went back home and countries became independent and the United Nations was established, and there was something called the Commonwealth, which is the former British colonies, and trade became easier among nations. That is when multiculturalism became a thing, because then everyone was trying to emphasize on the nationalist ideology, saying, yes, we are not British, we are Bangladeshis, we are Pakistanis, we are Indian, we are Sri Lankan, we are all of this, we are Indonesian, we are not just Nusantara, but it is just an independent state. The Dutch have left. We are not Malaysian. We are not from other countries, we are distinct. So national identity, which was a response to the colonial oppression, resulted in multiculturalism. In the 90s, something happened. Globalization, I think most of you were not even born in the early 90s. You were probably born much later than that. So the fall of the Soviet Union, breaking down into smaller things, advance in technology, the internet, all of these things resulted in globalization for the first time. There was no globalization between the 90s. And that is when dialogue started becoming an important thing. And multiculturalism was replaced by interculturalism. And then even after that, in the 2010s, we had something called transculturalism, which is the third step in the evolution from multiculturalism to how we understand culture. Transculturalism is not just about dialogue, it's about recognizing that difference is always there. It is embedded in human civilization. It is the norm. It is not the exception. So these are the three paradigms of culture. So if we look closer at transculturalism, which is the current way of understanding culture, the way we understand culture right now, it is not just separate, nor is it about dialogue, but it is about saying, you know, every country at every period of history will always be multicultural. It's always multiple. And that is transcultural. It is more adapted for the current state of globalization. And as I said, cultural diversity has become the norm rather than the exception. Let me give you an example. If I ask you what is Chinese food, let's have Chinese food. Or if we say let's have Indonesian food, what would you refer to as Indonesian food? Spicy? Yeah. Or maybe something like nasi goreng, classic Indian food, Indonesian food, spices, yeah, and it's fried, etc. But is there such thing as a nasi goreng which is universally Indonesian? Because it's always different in different areas, right? So which one would you represent as the best sample of Indonesian nasi goreng? Or even if nasi goreng is actually the representative of Indonesian food rather than something else which is better. So that's the thing. Every country is always diverse. If you think about Chinese food, right? What do you mean by Chinese food? If you ask a Chinese person what is Chinese food, they'll say, well, it's different in Heilongjiang, Harbin, from Shenzhen, Guangdong, Shanghai, Yunnan, Fujian, Changsha. These are all very, very different. And we don't even know what they eat in Heilongjiang. That's very, very different because that is influenced by the Russian. It's very different from what we eat here. So what the heck is Chinese food? It is just a homogenization of something that is so complex that we want to reduce it to one thing, just like the Minangkabau are this, the Javanese are this, Indian food is this, Chinese food is this. So if you look at the second point, cultural diversity is the norm, not the exception. That kind of mindset, called the global imaginary, is what we need in order to enact the curriculum and make it, something more critical. So that is the connection between language, identity, and curriculum, which is today's topic. So what we need to do is we need to move away from multiculturalism to interculturalism to transculturalism. If you are still thinking in a multicultural way, you are probably 50 years behind. Because multiculturalism was a concept of the 70s. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you can still say Indonesia is multicultural. That is true. Indonesia is multicultural. But when it comes to pedagogy, when it comes to the embedding of culture in the classroom, when it comes to differentiation, you have to think in a transcultural way, not in a multicultural way, because that is 50 years old. Now, just like culture, language can also be viewed in different ways, not just in one way. Let's take a look. Now, this guy, his name is Mikhail Bakhtin. He's one of my 3 or 4 favorite theorists. Mikhail Bakhtin from Russia, and he is the father of what we call heteroglossia, or competing voices. In fact, he was also a literary critic. He wasn't so much a linguist. He was a philosopher and a literary critic, and in particular, he was one of the most outstanding critics of Fyodor Dostoevsky, was the great Russian novelist. But he did that in a way, the kind of analysis that he did is a very helpful way of understanding language. So Bakhtin came up with the idea of heteroglossia, which means competing voices. Previously, it was the monoglossic view. So a bilingual was seen to be 2 monolinguals living in the same person. So if you're a bilingual, it's like you have Javanese language speaker and you have Bahasa language speaker and maybe the English language speaker. So L1 plus L2, first language, second language. That's the fractional view. It's like they're separate. Bakhtin came up with the heteroglossic view, which says that languages are actually not separate. They cannot be separated, and pedagogically, it is not wise to separate languages because both languages coexist in the same person at the same time. Which means that when you're teaching students who speak more than one language, it is actually beneficial for them if you use their first language, if you allow them to use their first language. So in the classroom, if you're teaching English, how many of you teach English in the classroom? Many of you are teachers here, aren't you? You teach English to your students in schools or somewhere? Yeah. Do you allow your students to use Bahasa in the classroom? Yes, you do. Do some of your colleagues think it is better if you use only English, no Bahasa at all? Yes. Yes, they think so. Why do they think so? Because of, comprehensible input, and they get more exposure and etc. Are there schools in Indonesia where even if the teacher isn't competent enough, they are not allowed to use Bahasa? Like you have to teach in English. Yes, right? You have to teach English. That is a very monoglossic view. You are separating L1 from L2. But Bakhtin is saying, no, you shouldn't separate. You should actually use L1 with L2 because they are already together. And the more you know about your first language or your second language, the easier it is to learn a second or a third or a fourth language. So that is called heteroglossia. So 2 different ways of looking. Have you heard of native speakerism or native speaker fallacy? Have you heard about this? Okay. Now, I don't know if that is true in Indonesia, probably not to the same extent as in Korea or in Japan. A 19-year-old or 18-year-old guy who just finished high school and doesn't have much money but wants to travel around the world, what they do is backpacking. You know what backpacking is? It's a very cheap way of traveling because you stay in very cheap hotels and you do some work as a cleaner or a waiter in a hotel. And with that money, you can afford to travel, and then you just travel from one country to another. So a lot of American and British backpackers They go to Korea and Japan, and they work in schools as English teachers, and they get very good money out of it. And these children, I'm just saying children because they're 18 years old, they're younger than you. They have no teaching qualification. They have barely finished school. They don't know how to teach. They don't know pedagogy. Pedagogy is not the same as teaching. Teaching is just to say something, how to do something. Pedagogy is the science of teaching. It's to actually know how to teach. So this is what you guys are learning here. So they are given high salaries in schools in Japan and Korea, these 18-year-olds, because of their skin color, white, and because of their accent, native speaking accent. So the schools in Korea and Japan, all of them, they think that, oh, okay, they are young, they don't have any teaching experience, but they have a native accent, so they can teach speaking, right? That is called native speakerism, or native speaker fallacy. Native speakerism means the belief that if you can speak a language well, or if it is your native language, you will teach it well. You will be able to teach it, which is not true, because you need to know how to teach. Okay, so here is a quote that would make you think about some of the problems with monolingual instruction. Bilingual education programs developed in the 20th century responded to what we've called a monoglossic belief, L1, L2, which assumes that legitimate linguistic practices are only those enacted by monolinguals. And that is why that kind of colonial mindset makes us feel like if your skin is white and if you have a native accent of English, oh yeah, of course, you'll be able to teach language better, which is not true. If you are qualified to teach English, like you guys, you will do a much better job, even if you don't have a native accent of English. As I said, you are not supposed to have a native accent of English, and you should not try, and you should not ask your students to try, because they are not native speakers, and there's nothing wrong with that. How much time do we have, Ibu? How much time do we have? Maybe. No, I think we are supposed to finish at 3:30. Are we supposed to finish at 4? Yeah. Okay, so maybe I'll finish in half an hour and then Q&A. Okay, yes, please. All right. So here's the thing. So as I said, standardized native accent. There is no such thing as a standardized native accent. So if you say you like British English, have you heard someone from Wales speak, or someone from North Ireland speak, or someone from the Highland in Scotland speak? They speak very differently, and sometimes they don't understand each other. So if you say British English, what kind of British English are you referring to? There is no norm. There are different types of British English. So here is a video. We are not going to watch it, but this video, if you click on this link, it will take you to a video which will show that, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, a member of parliament in Britain said something in English, but the speaker didn't understand him because he was speaking in a Scottish accent. So the speaker told him, "I'm really sorry, I don't understand you. Can you repeat what you just said?" So he tried a second time. And still the speaker couldn't understand him because of his Scottish accent. And finally the speaker had to say, "Can you write down what you said?" So even native speakers don't understand each other. And it would be very wrong for us to try to imitate them, because there is no such thing as a standardized variety. Now, this is what I do. When I travel a lot because that's my hobby. And also because I find Melbourne quite boring at times. Solo is much more interesting than Melbourne. Melbourne is much cleaner, it is much quieter, the weather is better, there is no weather pollution, it is safer, but it's more boring than Solo. Solo is much more exciting for me. So I travel quite often all around the world, and you know, Indonesia is one of the countries which I visit almost every year. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'll finish sooner than that. 3:30. Okay, that's actually good for me. All right, yeah, thank you, Bo. All right. All right, so when I travel, I talk to people, and when I talk to people, I try to use their language, but because I don't speak their language, sometimes using body language, sometimes using simplified English, I talk to them, I ask them about their education, I ask them about their life, I ask them about their culture, food, cultural practices and all of that. So last year in October, I was in Vietnam. I was in North Vietnam, and I went to a beautiful place called Sapa. It is a small town in the mountains, very close to Mount Fansipan, which is the highest peak in Southeast Asia. Just like last week, I was at Mount Bromo. So beautiful place. On the way back, we stopped at a village to talk to some of the people, and they were called the Dao Zo ethnic minority. Their first language is not Vietnamese. They have their own language. So Vietnamese is their second language. And I met this lady, her name is Mai Lai. Her first language is not Vietnamese, but she is a Vietnamese citizen. She was selling stuff to the tourists. So I met her, and I talked to her for a long time, and I said, can I interview you? And she said, okay, yes. And I interviewed her for about 15 minutes. In which language do you think I interviewed her? English? She has never been to school. How would she learn English? How do you think she would learn English? She's never been to school. This is last year in October. She has never been to school. And she didn't use a lot of body language. The video is on YouTube. You can actually watch it. And I understood everything she was telling me in English for 12 minutes. How do you think she learned English? From the tourist, right? Yeah. Now, I've been to Toraja 3 times. In Toraja, a lot of English-speaking tourists also visit every year. But they don't speak English. Mai Lai speaks English. Why? Because Mai Lai has seen it as an investment to learn English and use that to sell her stuff. Ole, ole. And all those souvenirs. And although she made grammatical mistakes, although she spoke slowly, just like Free Wife, just like Fred Chicken, I understood everything she was talking about. There was no communication problem with Mai Lai. On the other hand, people in Toraja, they think, you are a tourist, you're most welcome, but please speak my language. I don't want to speak your language. You have to speak my language. And if you want to buy stuff, you have to try to use my language or use body language. I am not going to be linguistically appropriated, just because you're from a richer country and you're paying me money or whatever. So it's a different attitude. And this might be reflected in the curriculum. So what are the curricular implications? What are the implications on the curriculum, depending on the different ways of looking at culture, multiculturalism, interculturalism, cross-culturalism, transculturalism, and looking at different linguistic identities and heteroglossia, monoglossia. What does it mean for the curriculum? Here is the question here. What happens when their children go to school? So someone like Mai Lai, who has learned English as her third language. First language, Dao Zo. Second language, Vietnamese, right? The national language. Third language, English. She has never been to school. She is not literate. She just picked up English by listening to people. What will happen to her child? Her child will go to school, learn Tiếng Viet, which is the Vietnamese language, and pick up English probably from tourists, just like her mom, but eventually she will forget her L1, which is Dao Zo, not Tiếng Viet. She will forget her first language, the mother tongue. So within 2 or 3 generations, what is happening is you're losing one language. It's linguistic genocide. And that is happening because the mother has learned a foreign language for her own business purposes, English. It wouldn't have happened if she hadn't, because they don't teach her first language in schools. It's a minority language. They don't teach it. It will eventually die. So this is where language policy comes in. Now, the next few slides, good news, the next few slides I will go through very quickly because you will all get a copy of the slides, so I don't have to read them, and also because we're running out of time. So I'll try to finish in about 10 minutes or maybe less. Yeah, after that Q&A. Yeah. So I'll just do it very quickly, but just to wrap up, showing how everything fits together. This is where the language policy comes in. The language policy is an official legal documentation that determines the priority of languages, the national language, and also how it would be taught, how it would be put into the curriculum, all of these things. So every country, not every country, most countries have a national policy. So according to Tollefson and Sui, this is actually quite old and quite well known. There are three components interrelated of language policy: planning, management, ideology, and practices, which includes the curriculum. Now, the Indonesia's national policy, language policy, is not new. In fact, it was established in 1967, which declared Bahasa Indonesia as the national language. And historically, of course, Bahasa is not a new language. It is a lingua franca to connect the entire country because it was already a part of the linguistic landscape of Nusantara, including Malaysia. So it was kind of convenient. So Kanagaraja, Suresh Kanagaraja, who is very well known for his research in language education, he is originally from Sri Lanka. He talks about two different types of pedagogical paradigms, or in other words, teaching approaches. On the left-hand side is the traditional, or the mainstream, and on the right side is critical pedagogy. So in order to answer the question, how can we embed a better and a more critical understanding of language and culture into the curriculum, which is the three main topics, language and culture, how we can put it in the curriculum? The answer is we do it through critical pedagogy, which is what we are looking at on the right side. So we need to move from mainstream or traditional pedagogy to critical pedagogy. And critical pedagogy is mainly the kind of pedagogy that creates independent learners who can think by themselves and don't take anything for granted just because it's written in a book. And they are given the space to reflect so that they are empowered and their agency can flourish. So they have that independent thinking capability. They ask questions about the curriculum, materials, teaching methods, about the cultural appropriateness of the curriculum. So, as I say, Javanese, Minahasa, Sasak saying, raises issues of ideology and power and the hidden curriculum. So things that the government, for example, wants to promote through the curriculum, they are critical about all of this. That is critical pedagogy. Now, the Merdeka Belajar, or MBKM, Campus Merdeka, also has critical pedagogy embedded in its agenda. So if you look at it, it prioritizes and promotes, among other things, critical thinking capabilities. And this can be done through a number of things for the teacher, including differentiated instruction, which I will show you next, and self-directed inquiry, student autonomy. 3 years ago, this book was published by Suban Zain, an Indonesian researcher, and the book's name is Language Policy in Super Diverse Indonesia. We don't have time, otherwise I would have given you a synopsis of this book. But he talks about something called super diversity. So Indonesia is already diverse. He's not talking about diversity, he's talking about super diversity, which means diversity within diversity. So the transcultural rather than multicultural approach. So the spread of English, I think we can just skip this because we know how English has spread, why it has become the main language of the world, why we are learning English rather than Dutch or rather than French. And then language policy and how it constructs national and cultural identities. And also the notion of nation and nationalism. So remember what I said about food? In a way, in a sense, there is no such thing as Indonesian food because it's all kind of different, and we try to homogenize it. In the same way, when we talk about Indonesia, when we talk about Indonesian, when we talk about Indonesian patriotism, there are certain values that we try to follow. Like, you know, we have Pancasila, and from Dosen we have the three Dharma Perguruan Tinggi. So these are the ideological constructs that define a nation. So for Indonesia, Three Dharma, and then we have the Pancasila. Of course, these are very distinct to Indonesia, but within that there is a lot of variety that we have to be aware of. And then this is an alternative to looking at communities, Anderson's imagined communities. Now, globalization on one hand makes us all belong to a global village, like the whole world is one big village, globalization. But on the other hand, it also creates strict borders between. So, you know, there was a time when you could travel to any country without a passport or a visa, right? But now you have to do it, so that's a paradox. Now, this is the last part. I'll try to finish. So when we talk about social justice, there are two things we have to keep in mind. One is equality and one is equity. And I've put the Bahasa translation here. I think I'll just pause until the adhan is done. So equity and equality are two different things. Let's take a look. This is equality. Everyone is given the same chance to watch the baseball game on the other side of the fence. But the only beneficiary here is the boy in the middle who's wearing a red shirt. The short person on the right still can't see what's there. And the tall guy, he actually doesn't need it because he's already tall enough. So that is what happens when everyone is treated equally. That's equality. You treat everyone equally and you tell, I'm equal to everyone. I treat everyone equally. It sounds very good when you say, I treat everyone equally, but maybe it's not helpful. That's not the right thing. So what we need to do is practice equity, which is a different thing. Equity is to give persons according to their needs. This is differentiation, right? I will give someone what they need. So I remove one of those boxes from the tall guy because he doesn't need it, and then I'll give it to the short guy who needs it. So I'll just show you the visualization. Equity means equal input, unequal output. Equality. Equity means unequal input, equal output. Okay? So let's see it here. Equality, equal input, unequal output. Equity, unequal input but equal output. Which one is more important? We want equal output, right? We want everyone to succeed, not some people. So that is what is meant by social justice. Now, social justice is actually embedded in the agenda of critical pedagogy. Okay, in reality, this is what happens. Look at what happens in reality. We give much more to someone who doesn't need it, and someone who needs it, we don't give them anything. It's the opposite, right? Okay, so understanding differentiation. Differentiation means to treat everyone differently because they are male or female, Muslim or non-Muslim, Javanese or Maduris or young, old, disabled or not. We treat everyone in a differentiated manner. So it's in Pancasila, which talks about social justice for all peoples of Indonesia. Social justice, fairness is not everyone getting the same thing. Fairness is everyone getting what they need. Some people need more, some people need less. Now, when it comes to learning styles, we all have different ways of learning better. So if everyone is given the same kind of assessment, like it has to be a written test, 60 minutes, and you have to finish answering 5 questions. If it is like that, the student who gets the highest score is not necessarily the student who has learned the most. It might be because they can write too fast, because it's 1 hour and they have a very fast handwriting. So you are disadvantaging other students who write slow. So instead, if you differentiate the assessment by saying, instead of writing, you do a portfolio or you do an oral presentation, you might have someone else who gets the highest, not that person. All right? And differentiation is also respectful teaching. It's the same point here. Okay, and when we look at evaluating the curriculum to make it more critical pedagogy oriented, these are some of the things that we should look at. I'm just skipping so I'll just finish here with this quote by Ki Hajar Dewantara, who's the founder of education in Indonesia and the founder, of course, of the Taman Siswa, which was more than a school. It was a system of thought. So help me pronounce it. Let's do it together. Ing ngarso sung tulodo, ing madya mangun karso, tutwari handayani. All right. But we have problems, We have too many things to do together. We have too many things to do together. This shouldn't be an excuse for us, because critical pedagogy and an integration of language culture curriculum is our mission. If you have signed up to become a teacher, this is what we need to do. So this is my last slide. What are the implications for teaching and learning in terms of language, culture, curriculum implication? Home language is important in all contexts. Heteroglossia, L1, L2, L3, not L1 minus L2. Recognition and acceptance of Indonesian accent. Don't feel ashamed or uncomfortable or embarrassed if you have an Indonesian accent. You should be proud of it. Multilingual corrective feedback, not just in English. Need for critical pedagogy. Need for dialogic feedback and scaffolding, helping in a differentiated way. Value and celebration of linguistic diversity at school. Congruence with parents' goals, so just maybe more collaboration between parents and the school community. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. Right.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Raqib, for the fruitful and very inspiring materials of very inspiring presentation today. And actually, Dr. Raqib, at the Department of English Education, we have several subjects that you have summarized, like yes, together, like sociolinguistics, English curriculum development, and teaching English as a foreign language. So it's a very, yes, together in one presentation. So it's a very wow presentation. And I believe that my students here have insights or maybe questions for Dr. Raqib related to the presentation. So I will be opening probably 3 to 4 questions for you to ask. And yes, first question, please. Yes, would you please mention your name and what semester you are, and your question, please. Can the committee give microphone? Yes.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
My name is Hafid Bayu Prakoso. I am first semester.
First semester.
Fourth.
Fourth. Okay.
I want to ask a question. What about the case of someone who is influenced to speak language in a certain accents because the exposure they get is from someone who speaks English in that accents? In my experience, while I was learning English, I have friends who are from different countries. And at the time, I was still learning, so now that I have fluent English, I unconsciously slip like a few pronunciations like that. Thank you very much.
Okay, yes. Dr. Raqib, will you, accept 2, 4 questions first, and then you answer, or you will answer one question right away?
Ibu, I have very short memory, so
All right, yeah.
maybe one by
Please.
one, otherwise
Yes.
I have very short-term memory.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to get the question. Was it about mixing up accents? Different accents mixing? And whether that is okay, or what was the actual question?
What about the case of someone who is influenced to speak language in a certain accent? Because the exposure they get is from someone who speaks English in that accent.
Oh, yes, yes. So you mean if you are exposed to a person who speaks with an accent, you will acquire it as well? Yeah, no, actually, most of the time. It is true, yeah, that is true. So it is true that your English teacher's accent will influence your accent. Yeah, no, that's good. But I'm saying that your international student friend's accent will affect your accent as well. Yeah, exactly. So in other words, if you want to get native speaker accent, you have to have native speaker friends. Or you have to expose yourself to people speaking and singing in native English. So it means watching movies, watching Friends. I think you all watch Friends. Everyone watch Friends. You know, the series from the 90s, Friends. Watch Hollywood movies, etc. And try to do it without subtitles. That might help. But on the other hand, if you talk to international student friends who have an accent, slowly over the period of time, you might acquire their accent rather than native speaker accent. So the main issue here is if you are mutually intelligible, if they understand you, if someone else understands you, if a native speaker understands you, then it's okay, it's absolutely fine. So it's about being clear and intelligible, not the accent. And if you have a mix of 2 or 3 accents, like mix because of your friends, so what? It's fine. Not a problem. Thank you.
So it's multi-accent in one person? Like multi-accent in one person?
Yeah, one person.
Yeah.
Hybrid.
Hybrid accent, okay. Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, second question, please. Yeah, please. Here.
Cek, cek. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Jabal Sofa from third semester of English Magister. And here, if I may, I would like your opinion about my statement. Okay. If we, as the teachers, allowing their students to use Indonesian accent English, so we don't need any grammatical to assess them. We don't need fluency to assess them. We don't need pronunciation to assess them. Is it correct?
But in Indonesia, speaking is not assessed in any case. So it's not about fluency or correctness or intelligibility, but speaking is actually not assessed. Is it assessed? It's not. It is not assessed in any case. Yeah, but there is no formal grade for, yeah, maybe, yeah. So you see what I mean? Because in Indonesia, just like in most EFL countries, not just, Indonesia is not an exception, it's actually the norm. So in most cases, the speaking or spoken English is taught, but it is not assessed. So you don't get a grade for that, there is no test. And because of that, what happens is called washback. I think you know what washback means. Washback means if something is not assessed, students don't take it seriously.
Yes.
And teachers don't take it seriously because it's like, okay, it's in the curriculum, I'll teach you, but it won't come in the test, so don't worry about it, right?
Oh, okay.
But I think you've raised another very important question. See, guys, I said that there is nothing wrong if you have an Indonesian accent. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to improve your English. No. I'm not saying, you know, you don't need to improve your Indonesian accent, your spoken English. I'm not saying that. I'm saying as far as your identity is concerned, you should not be ashamed of your Indonesian accent or to not ask your students to follow British or American accent. That would be shameful if you ask them to follow British. But that doesn't mean I'm saying that accent is not important. Accent is important. Accent can be improved. Even in Bahasa, even in Javanese, there's one form of Javanese which is formal. What is it called? Kromo. Yeah. So you can always improve your accent, even in a foreign language. So try to improve your accent, and it should be assessed if possible, but not standardized British or standardized American. It will still be Indonesian, but it will get better and better and better. Of course, it is important. I'm not saying don't teach it. It's not, yeah.
Okay, thanks for your opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
But if they don't assess it in the test, no one will take it seriously, right? Yeah.
Okay, yes. Okay, third question, please. Yeah, please. Over there.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Armita, and I am from second semester of Master Education, English Education. So I would like to ask about, as a beginner teacher, how would we, kind of like, to make students believe that Indonesian accent is okay, not only you have to speak British or maybe American or maybe Australian accent. So how to make them believe that it is okay to speak Indonesian accent? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tavmida. Very good question, because young children, like your students, right? They also hear from their parents, from others in the society, and everyone's thinking, oh, you need a British accent, etc. In fact, in Indonesia, it's not so bad, but in some countries, like I was in Japan, my daughter is in Japan now. In Japan, they insist on American English. Like, if you have you either have a British accent or an American accent. You can't have anything in between. That's how they believe in Japan. If you have a Japanese accent or any other accent, no, it's not acceptable. So they are very strict about it. But in reality, very few people can achieve American English, right? It's not easy to do that because after a certain age, your accent is fixed. So the accent that I'm using now is a mix of Australian and Bangladeshi accent now. But my children speak 100% Australian accent because they were born there. I will never have that because I am called a compound bilingual because my accent was already fixed by the time I went to Australia. So it's now different, right? So it is difficult to explain to your young children because they are also hearing from their parents. Their parents are expecting them to have standardized accent, British or American, whatever it is. And then the teacher is saying, no, it's okay, you can have Indonesian accent. So the parents might not be happy with you. They might say, why are you saying my students to have Indonesian accent? So it is difficult to solve the problem, but I think if you make the students realize that intelligibility is more important than accent. Intelligibility means I speak in English, and people understand me, and the pace is okay, the intonation is fine, the stress timing is fine, the, everything else like grammar, everything is fine. That is the main achievement of learning a foreign language, because you can't explain to young children about colonialism, colonial mindset. Like, it's too difficult for you will understand, but your students won't. So maybe just say that we learn a foreign language to communicate, or any language to communicate. So that's why I said, fried chicken, free wife, it's okay. We laugh at it, but it does its job, and it was written by a person who didn't study at a university. They just know it by listening to people, and I mean, that is good enough for them. Now, of course, if you're teaching, you have a responsibility to improve there. So you can't just say, I don't care, right? But maybe talk to the community, to your colleagues. If you don't make change, who would? Maybe you are the one who would make a big change in your school by saying intelligibility is the real thing. Accent is secondary. Accent doesn't matter if people understand you. All right, Tahmida, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's already 3:30. Will you receive one more question?
Of course.
Okay. One last question, please. Yeah, over there. Okay, please. A lady in the middle.
My name is Farida, and I am from 6th semester, Faculty of Teacher Training and Education. I would like to ask on how do I know if my biases or used pedagogical knowledge affect my teaching learning process in an inclusive classroom? Sometimes when I teach the students, I struggle to find out the tactics and pedagogies to be executed to make my classroom more interesting or more productive. It's because my first language wasn't Japanese. My first language was Bahasa Indonesia. And most of the kids here, especially in Solo, they use Japanese as their first language. Thank you.
It's difficult when, one of the differences between, one of the instructional differences, instructional means teaching based, right? Differences between EFL and ESL is the shared language between teacher and student, right? So if an Indonesian student is learning English in Indonesia, that student is EFL. If the same student goes to Melbourne, Australia, to study English, the same student becomes ESL. Why? Because in Australia, English-speaking country, English is also spoken outside the classroom, not just in the classroom. So it becomes a second language. So EFL is for non-English-speaking countries, but in English-speaking countries, it is ESL. So what are the instructional differences? In EFL, usually the teacher shares the same first language with their students. But in your case, it is not. In ESL, the teacher rarely shares the first language with their students. So they can ask students to speak in their first language among themselves, but the teacher won't understand that, which is supposed to be in ESL, not in EFL. But in your case, it's happening because you don't speak Javanese. Your first language is Bahasa. Okay, so in that case, you can still allow them to use Bahasa, even if you don't understand it. Unfortunately, you won't be able to scaffold them or to give them corrective feedback, multilingual corrective feedback. I've turned it off, never mind. You won't be able to give them multilingual corrective feedback. So you can still use Bahasa as their second language, but your first language, rather than English, to scaffold them. It is still better than using English for corrective feedback, but not for Javanese. That's fine, it's okay, as long as you allow them. You shouldn't say, don't use Javanese because I don't understand Javanese. You can't say that. Because even in ESL situations, teachers should allow students to speak their first language, even if they can't understand it, right? All right. Or you can learn Javanese from your students, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Give applause, everyone. Okay, it's now 3:34, and I think this session should be ended very soon. And let me tell the implications from your presentation. So, from the fruitful presentation given by Dr. Raqib, allow me to give some implications. So, dealing with the accent, please be yourself. Don't be ashamed. Don't feel embarrassed with your identity. Yeah, it's okay to have Indonesian accent, to have even Japanese accent, or maybe hybrid accent, as he has said. Okay, so it's okay. English is English. So let's see English more as an international language. And then, maybe next time, sir, we can talk about the Catrovian circle, which is, I think it can give them understanding how, the position of English in the world, and etc. But maybe next time, if we invite you again next time. Okay, yeah, but again, that's the implication that we can get today in this session. And thank you very much for Dr. Raqib Chowdhury for your presentation. It's wonderful, and I'm very happy to be your moderator in this session. Yeah, I also, accept many knowledge, receive many knowledge to teach, because I teach sociolinguistics as well. Yeah, that's our common sense. Yes, sure. Can we have it? Oh, yes. Yes, okay, thank you very much. Okay, yeah, thank you. All right, so thank you very much, and I'm Susi, so just call me Susi, not Ibu, please. Because I believe you haven't, oh, okay. I'm young, yeah, I'm young. I'm not Ibu. So just call me Susi. And then I'm as the moderator, signing out. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. But, okay, before, after the MC closes the session, let's get pictures together. Yeah, before you go home or go outside the room. Thank you. MC, please.
Okay. Thank you for Mr. Raqib Chowdhury for the wonderful material, and thank you for Ms. Susiati as moderator. The last agenda is closing. Let's close our agenda with saying Hamdalah together. Alhamdulillah. Sebelum pulang, kita ada sesi foto bersama, harap untuk semua mahasiswa tidak meninggalkan tempat terlebih dahulu. Kemudian bagi teman-teman, mohon sampah dan sisa makanan dan botol minum bisa diletakkan di depan pintu keluar. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Untuk para peserta, dimohon untuk berdiri.
yang sebelah kiri sini agak ke tengah ya. Nanti biar fotonya satu in frame.
Oke, untuk
Ayo. Atau mungkin yang
Untuk teman-teman
yang sebelah sini
bisa foto
Bu
terlebih
Maya,
dahulu ya,
silakan Bu.
teman-teman.
Yang sebelah sini geser ke sini semua aja. Jadi di sini aja tadi. Bu Maya silakan ke tengah Bu, please.
We can move the chairs a bit.